June 1971, 29-year-old Gloria Booth finished her shift at a quiet London pub, said goodnight to her manager and vanished into the night. Hours later, her naked body was found dumped face down in brambles in Stonefield Park, strangled, brutally mutilated and marked by deep human bite wounds in one of Britain's most disturbing unsolved murders. Police interviewed over 12,000 people as detectives raced to catch a killer they feared could strike again, haunted by deeply disturbing details of what had been done to Gloria. Details so shocking, police deliberately kept them hidden from the public. Was she killed by a local maniac hiding in plain sight? Or was Gloria Booth one of the earliest victims of the UK's most feared serial killer, Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper? Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Gloria Marlene Booth entered the world in 1942, born in the north of England, long before her name would become tied to one of West London's most haunting unsolved murders. She was born in the town of Blaydon, in the metropolitan borough of Gateshead, Tyne and Wear. Her mother was Mary Noble, and Gloria grew up with at least one brother, along with a younger sister named Elsie. As with so many historic cold cases, much of Gloria's early life has been lost to time. The records are thin, the memories faded. What remains is only the outline of a young woman who, at 17 years old, left the north behind and moved to London, hoping to build something new for herself. In the capital, Gloria found part-time work modeling for various clothing brands. It was there, in the rhythm of city life, that she met the man who would become her husband, Douglas Booth. In 1963, Gloria married Douglas. They never had children. By 1969, Gloria and Douglas, who worked as a carpenter, had moved into a house of their own in West London, settling at 41 Castle Bar Mews in Ealing. Gloria reportedly worked as a typist while continuing to pick up occasional modeling jobs for clothing brands. But behind the ordinary appearance of marriage life, things had quietly begun to fracture. In the months leading up to Gloria's murder, she and Douglas had been discussing divorce. Their relationship had not exploded into violence or scandal, it had simply and sadly run its course. By all accounts, the separation was mutual and amicable. There were no known domestic disturbances, no signs of abuse. They had simply reached the end and had already begun sleeping in separate rooms while planning a permanent separation. On the 7th of June 1971, Gloria started a new job as a barmaid at the White Hart pub on Yedding Lane in Northolt. It should have been an ordinary fresh start. The manageress of the White Hart later described Gloria as quiet, reserved, and not particularly talkative. She kept to herself. No friends ever came in to visit her during her shifts. She worked, she left, and she revealed little. 5 days later, on the 12th of June 1971, nothing seemed unusual inside the Booth household. Douglas left home for the day and was due to return the following day. When he left, Gloria was alive, well and at home. It would be the last time he ever saw her alive. At 11:15 p.m. that night, Gloria finished her shift at the White Hart pub. She gave a simple good night to the bar manager Thomas Gale and stepped out into the warm June night. But instead of heading home, she walked along the Ruislip road toward the Polish War Memorial, the opposite direction from her home. She was planning to attend a party at a US Air Force base near Ealing in West London. At 11:50 p.m., standing at a payphone, Gloria made a call that would become one of the most chilling moments in the entire case. She rang her friend Hugh Allen, a 28-year-old barman at her local pub, the Viking on West End Road in South Ruislip. Hugh had promised he would take her to the party once he got the address. When the phone rang at the Viking and Hugh answered, he heard Gloria's voice on the other end. "Is that you, Hugh?" "Yes," he replied. And then, without warning, the line went dead. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. Because Gloria had called from a payphone, Hugh had no way to ring her back. He would later torment himself over that moment, wondering if he should have gone to find her sooner, wondering if the killer had stepped into that phone box, causing the line to suddenly cut off. At 12:25 a.m. on the 13th of June, Gloria was seen by multiple passers-by standing alone at a bus stop near the Viking pub on West End Road. She stood at 5 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 8 stone, slimly built, with dark hair. When last seen, she was wearing white trousers, a beige and brown patterned midi coat, and carrying a black handbag. Then she vanished. In the early hours of June 13th, as dawn crept over South Ruislip, a young paperboy making his early morning round cut through Stonefield Park and stumbled into horror. There, in the brambles, just a minute's walk from Gloria's local pub, the Viking, he found the naked body of a woman lying face down, discarded like rubbish. It was Gloria Booth. Bravely, the boy checked for a pulse before sprinting home to tell his parents. Soon after, another local man, Charles Dudley, was walking his 2 dogs through the same park, adjacent to the Bourne Primary School, when he came upon the same dreadful sight. This field was known locally as the Wreck. Trying to preserve some shred of dignity for the dead woman, Charles covered the body, tragically contaminating potential evidence in the process. Police were quickly summoned, officers arrived and cordoned off the area, but Stonefield Park carried an eerie reputation already. Locals knew it as part of what had long been called Ruislip's Murder Mile. In 1954, some years earlier, another young woman, 21-year-old Jean Townsend, had been strangled there with her own scarf in a murder that was never solved. Now history seemed to be repeating itself. Gloria lay face down, tangled in briars, naked except for a scarf still tied around her neck. Reports described her bra as having been pushed upward to expose her breasts. There were deep bite marks around her breast area. Her clothes were scattered nearby. One shoe had been carefully hidden beneath a hedge, a strange contrast to the otherwise chaotic scene. Her black handbag and its contents were then found scattered in bushes bordering Walnut Way and Masson Avenue, suggesting the killer may have exited through one of those roads. Detectives immediately launched door-to-door inquiries across the surrounding streets and beyond. They soon discovered an open-air party had been taking place in a nearby field. Investigators rushed to trace the revelers, desperate for witnesses, but they were already fairly certain Gloria had not been killed there. Her body, they believed, had been dumped, driven to the site after she was murdered somewhere else. The open-air party was ruled a dead end. Once Gloria was formally identified, police turned first, as they almost always do, to the estranged husband. Douglas Booth was quickly scrutinized, but just as quickly he was ruled out. Yes, they were divorcing, but his movements were firmly accounted for. His alibi was solid. Back in Newcastle, Gloria's mother Mary received the news the old-fashioned way, visited by policemen at the door, hats in hand, heads lowered. Mary broke down screaming. Her daughter Elsie tried to hold her together. The post-mortem was carried out by state pathologist Derek Peacock. The cause of death was determined to be ligature strangulation. He estimated her time of death as having occurred between 12:25 a.m. and 3 a.m. on the 13th of June. Traces of mineral oil and red brick dust were found on Gloria's body, leading to a prominent theory that she had been taken to some kind of industrial location, a garage, workshop, or mechanic space, where she was murdered before being dumped back at the park. There was no evidence of sexual intercourse. Instead, the pathologist formed a disturbing theory. The killer may have been what he described as a sexual pervert, possibly impotent, someone driven not by intercourse but by domination, torture, and sadistic control. She had been bitten repeatedly. The bite marks to her breasts were described as numerous, distinctive, and showed a pattern consistent with a gap in the front teeth. There were obvious signs of mutilation. Several nasty wounds marked her abdomen. Her pubic region had been mutilated. Her body appeared posed, her bra pushed upward to deliberately expose her breasts. She had also been struck over the head with a blunt object, possibly a hammer. Even more chilling, pathologists noticed the blunt force trauma and savage bite marks had likely been inflicted after death. The overall motive was assessed as sexual and sadistic. A closer look at the strangulation marks revealed subdermal bruising on either side of the Adam's apple and along the neck, injuries consistent with a ligature such as a scarf as initially suspected, or possibly a knotted rope or garrote. Police were hunting a maniac. A reconstruction of Gloria's final moments was staged, using a woman of similar build and clothing to retrace her route. It generated fresh leads, but no immediate breakthroughs. Attention then turned to the last person known to have spoken to her, Hugh Allen. Detectives tracked him down and demanded a full account of his whereabouts from the moment Gloria had called him until around 3 a.m., but Hugh provided a cast-iron alibi. He too was swiftly eliminated. Police then examined the various payphones along Ruislip Road, hoping for some overlooked clue that might point toward her attacker. They found nothing. Their early profile was a local sexual deviant, someone familiar with the area, someone who knew Stonefield Park well enough to dump a body in its darkest corner, someone who likely understood garages, machinery, oil, brick dust. Then investigators learned something else. Gloria sometimes hitchhiked. She was not entirely unaccustomed to getting into strangers' cars. Perhaps, police theorized, when the party at the military base fell through, she had tried to hitch a ride home, and perhaps the wrong man stopped. On the 16th of June 1971, around 30 officers combed through the long grass searching for a carrier bag and any other trace evidence. They meticulously searched the grass verges along Ruislip Road between the White Hart pub and the Polish War Memorial. Police reportedly found 2 potentially important items, though they never revealed what they were. On the 18th of June, the coroner's inquest then opened. Detective Chief Superintendent David Frew, leading the investigation, told the coroner he had grave concerns. This case, he said, had aspects of an extremely disturbing nature and unusual features that would not be made public unless an arrest was made. Those details have never fully been revealed. He outlined the deep bite marks to Gloria's breasts and stated she had been suffocated while in a sexual embrace. Privately, the fear was obvious. If this killer was not caught quickly, he could strike again. The next day, June 19th, police staged 2 roadblocks on West End Avenue where Gloria had last been seen walking. Drivers were shown her photograph and asked whether they had seen her the previous Saturday night. Police took down around 1,300 statements. Still, nothing concrete emerged. On the 28th of September, Gloria Booth was laid to rest at Breakspear Crematorium in Ruislip. Family, friends, and detectives still chasing her killer stood among the mourners. Then on the 15th of October, the inquest heard an even darker theory from pathologist Derek Peacock. He stated the killer was likely impotent given the absence of sexual assault. He described the man as sadistic by nature. Most chillingly, he confirmed that the savage bite marks and blunt force injuries to Gloria's head had been inflicted after death. The jury returned the only verdict they could: murder by a person or persons unknown. By this stage, police had interviewed around 12,000 people, and they were no closer to finding the killer. Every lead had been exhausted. Their theory remained this: Gloria had either been abducted or offered a lift near the bus stop by the Viking pub in the early hours of June 13th. Her killer had taken her to an industrial location. There, he murdered her. Then he drove her body to the recreation field off Cedar Avenue and left her there in the darkness. But without witnesses, without a confession, and without physical evidence strong enough to convict, the case slipped into silence. It became cold. In the local community, however, whispers never stopped. Rumours spread about a local mechanic. According to anecdotal stories passed around Ruislip for years after, a well-known and feared man who owned a mechanic shop just outside the area had allegedly been seen entering a pub covered in blood on the day Gloria was murdered. He was said to be a regular in local bars and someone people were afraid of. It was further alleged that 3 acquaintances of Gloria had seen him bloodstained that night, and that at least one of them was threatened with serious harm, ordered not to tell police what they had seen. It must be stated clearly, though, that this remains hearsay, unverified anecdotal rumour never publicly corroborated by police, but the whispers endured. Then, decades later, a far more shocking theory emerged. One that would drag Gloria Booth's forgotten murder back into national headlines, a theory that linked her death to one of Britain's most notorious serial killers, Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. When Gloria was murdered in 1971, detectives treated her case as a standalone, sexually motivated killing. They had no reason to connect it to a then unknown lorry driver and gravedigger from Bingley, West Yorkshire. Sutcliffe's first officially acknowledged murder, Wilmer McCann in Leeds, would not occur until October 30th, 1975, more than 4 years later. By the time Sutcliffe was arrested in Sheffield in January 1981 and later convicted of 13 murders and 7 attempted murders, Gloria's file had long since gathered dust. Routine checks were reportedly made against unsolved murders, but no solid public link was ever established. Sutcliffe himself never mentioned Gloria, yet the forensic similarities were difficult to ignore. The ligature strangulation, the bite marks including the distinctive front tooth gap which Sutcliffe also had, the hammer-style head trauma, the mutilation to the abdomen and pubic area, the partial undressing and posing of the body, the brick dust, oil and grease suggesting access to a garage or industrial space. All of them echoed the brutal hallmarks that would later define the Ripper's crimes. The first serious public challenge came in the early 2010s. Retired Metropolitan Constable and cold case investigator Chris Clark spent years studying Sutcliffe's movements, work records and alibis. His breakthrough was Geographical. In 1971, Sutcliffe's then-girlfriend, Sonia Surma, whom he later married in 1974, had family ties in Alperton, West London, only a short drive from Ruislip. As a HGV driver and mechanic, Sutcliffe frequently travelled the country and could easily have been in London that night. Clark also noted something chilling. When Sutcliffe was arrested in 1981, he was carrying a 3-foot plated nylon rope with knots at both ends and in the middle. It appeared to fit the very pattern of neck bruising described in Gloria's post-mortem. In November 2013, Clark then went public. In a BBC London report, he explicitly named Gloria Booth as one of 7 unsolved London murders he believed Sutcliffe had committed in the early 1970s. For Gloria's family, especially her younger sister Elsie Cowan in Newcastle, it reopened wounds that had never healed. They pleaded for police to reinvestigate. They begged authorities to interview Sutcliffe in prison. The Metropolitan Police confirmed they had reopened a forensic review in 2010 and were awaiting test results, but stressed there was no evidence linking this case to any historic murder cases. Then in 2015, the theory exploded again with the publication of The Yorkshire Ripper, The Secret Murders, written by Chris Clark and investigative journalist Tim Tate. The book argued Sutcliffe may have been responsible for as many as 23 additional killings nationwide. According to the authors, Gloria's case matched 8 of the 11 classic Ripper characteristics, more than some of his officially confirmed victims. They pointed again to the ligature strangulation, the posed body, the front teeth bite mark gap, the mechanic's grease and dust, Sutcliffe's documented presence in the Ruislip area. They even noted a witness sighting of a man near the Polish War Memorial where Gloria had last been seen. Sutcliffe's strange obsession with a Polish headstone, the supposed source of the voices he claimed told him to kill, was cited as a possible reason he may have been drawn to that prominent war memorial while visiting nearby Alperton. The book also pointed to an unexplained lull in Sutcliffe's known offending between 1969 and 1975, suggesting he may have been refining his methods in London and elsewhere. For Gloria's family, the pain became public all over again. In 2018, Elsie Cowan told The Sun she was 100% convinced Sutcliffe had killed Gloria in the most horrible way and begged him to confess. Then, in November 2020, as Sutcliffe lay seriously ill in hospital before his death on the 13th of November, age 74, the family made one final desperate plea through the Mirror and other outlets. "I want to hear him confess before he dies," they said. But despite the compelling circumstantial parallels, police on both sides of the Pennines have consistently maintained the same position. There is no direct forensic evidence linking Peter Sutcliffe to Gloria Booth. More than 50 years later, Gloria Booth's killer has never been brought to justice, and her family were left with only questions instead of answers. Behind every cold case is a real person whose life mattered. Gloria was not just a headline, but a daughter, a sister, a wife, and someone deeply loved. Whatever happened that night in June 1971, she deserves to be remembered, and above all, she deserves justice. Thank you for watching and listening to Gloria's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, comments, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.